Thanks, Brian. First of all, an apology. I'm struggling with a bad throat, so I sound a little bit gruffer than normal, and I may cough a little bit and take some water, but I'm going to persevere. So those of you who don't know me, my name is Ruth. I'm one of the leaders here. I'm married to Graham, and we have two fabulous kids and fabulous in-laws. Is that how you... No, that's not the way, is it? Daughter-in-law and son-in-law, and a little grandson too. So I don't normally sound like this. So good morning, everybody. It's great to be here this morning, and we're going to continue our Advent series looking at Zechariah's story and song. And some of us know the story of Zechariah, but perhaps some of you don't. So I'm just going to give a little overview of what led to Zechariah singing this song. So Zechariah is a priest, and he is married to Elizabeth, and together they are described as blameless, as obeying all the commands that God has given blamelessly. Quite a description. And despite this amazing commitment to God, there is an underlying sadness in their lives because they are childless. And they lived in a culture where having a child gave you status and prestige. And so that was a pressure, a sadness for them. And now they're elderly, and their hope of having a child has seemingly passed. And as a priest, Zechariah was given the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to enter the sanctuary of the temple to burn incense before the Lord. So this was one of the most important occasions, if you could call having a career as a priest. This was the highlight of his time as a priest. Not everybody got to do this task. And as he's undertaking this special duty, an angel appears, and he's startled and gripped with fear. And the angel says, "Do not be afraid. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John." You can imagine that the fear might have changed to a look of shock and disbelief. He's been praying for years and years for a child, and it's not been answered, and now he's old. And after all those years of faithful service, now you're telling me we're going to have a son, and you're telling me his name? Can you imagine what was going on in Zechariah's mind? It must have been overwhelming. But then, Zechariah doesn't only tell him the name of the son, he gives him the career of his son. He's going to be great in the sight of the Lord. He's going to be filled with the Holy Spirit before he's even born. He's going to bring people back from Israel to the Lord. He's going to go before Jesus. He's going to prepare the way for Jesus. Imagine being told that about your child before he's even arrived. So from this quiet acceptance of childlessness and the years of unanswered pain and the longing comes this overwhelming wave of information. And so we can understand that Zechariah's response might have been, or was, well, how can I be sure of this? I'm an old man, and my wife is, getting along in years. He's trying to be polite, I guess. But in response, Gabriel tells Zechariah that he won't be able to speak until John is born because of his unbelief and because of his doubt. Silence comes upon Zechariah's voice. And as Zechariah comes out of the temple, the people are waiting for him to lead them, and they realize something's happened because he can't speak. So Zechariah completes his duties, and he must have been bursting to tell Elizabeth. Can you imagine? I can't keep a secret very easily. I can do it. But it's hard, isn't it, when we've got good news? We're just bursting to tell someone. Imagine you want to tell your wife that after all these years, a son is coming, and not just any son, a son who's going to come before Jesus. But Zechariah couldn't come. He couldn't use his own voice, a bit like me. So the time comes, and Elizabeth gives birth to the baby. John arrives. Put yourself in Zechariah's shoes. For years and years, he's longed for a child, so when the baby arrives, again, he must be bursting with joy and happiness. He knows the name his son is to be given and the task and the ministry before him. He must have been wanting to shout from the rooftops, but his mouth stays silent for 8 more days after John's birth. So on the 8th day, they bring John to the temple to circumcise him, and the community assume that he'll be called Zechariah. That was the culture. But Elizabeth, who can speak, says no. He's to be called John. And they're surprised at the name choice. At that point, John's mouth is released, his voice is released, and he began to speak. And after experiencing all those years of pain and sadness and the month of silence, he responds with a song of praise. Now, I was going to read the song, but Tori read it beautifully for us before, so we won't do that. But let's look at some of the rich words in this song. It's packed with joy and promise. I've got the verses on the screen there, Hannah, if you're able to. Perfect, thank you. God has come and redeemed his people. God has provided a horn of salvation. The horn of an animal is known for its strength and power. So this image talks of a powerful salvation. God rescues. Israel was oppressed by the Romans at the time. Zechariah talks of being rescued, delivered, liberated from the hands of the enemy and being able to serve without fear in holiness and righteousness. Zechariah talks about forgiveness and mercy, not just mercy, tender mercy. Isn't that beautiful? There's reconciliation with God. As in the other songs that we've looked at, or Brian looked at in particular last week, the same thing. Mary looked at the past, the present, and the future. So does Zechariah. He sings of the past. He looks at the oath sworn to Abraham. He looks at the mercy shown to his ancestors. He looks at the house of David and how salvation is coming through it. Then he talks of the personal. He rejoices in the gift of John, his son. The name John means God is gracious. The God of the Old Testament is gracious. And now through this song, Zechariah talks of the same God being present in the present and in the future. Excuse me. For many centuries, godly people have been waiting for what God had predicted. And now it's going to happen in their time and in their place. Mary had stayed with Zechariah and Elizabeth during that time of silence. Zechariah knows that the same angel who visited him has visited Mary and told Mary about her child and what that will mean. He knows that the child in Mary's womb is more important than the son he has just received. And Zechariah sings of the future. There will be the knowledge of salvation through the gift of Jesus. There will be the forgiveness of sins. The rising sun, which is a description of Jesus, is coming from heaven to shine on those in the darkness and in the shadow of death. Feet will be guided into paths of peace. But you know, this song isn't just a kind of one-hit Christmas wonder, as we tend to have every year. The song was given to Zechariah by the Holy Spirit as a result of the circumstances which Zechariah had lived through. So that's what I'd like to unpack a bit this morning, if that's okay. I'd like to think about the circumstances which led to this song. What was that period of time really like for Zechariah after he had understandably doubted, well, in my mind, understandably doubted the promise that God gave through Gabriel? You know, if I put myself in Zechariah's shoes, I think I'd kind of say, well, oh, that's very fair. I've done so much for you. I faithfully served you. I faithfully served your people in the temple. After so many years of longing for a child, and I accepted that reality, and now Elizabeth and I are kind of getting on, surely you can understand that my reaction of unbelief to this unexpected news. You know me inside and out, God. You know, as we come to the end of a year, we tend to take time to reflect on what's happened. And for me, as I have walked life's journey this year, a theme has emerged of now and not yet. Earlier this year, my friend Marcia sent me a song to listen to, and it led me to listen to the whole album by a guy called Aaron Williams, and I love it. And I came across his song called Now and Not Yet. And I really resonated with the words of the song as they spoke into what was happening in my life at that time. And then a few months later, an author, an artist that I read and listen to called Ruth Chu Simons released a book and a study guide entitled Now and Not Yet. I was intrigued, and so I listened to it because this was a theme I've been reflecting on in my own life. Zechariah had lived in the now and the not yet. He had lived in the now of faithfully serving his people as a priest, of telling them the Messiah was coming, but the not yet of waiting for that fulfillment to happen. He had lived in the now of the journey of childlessness and the reality of that dream of having a child seemingly not coming. And now he lived in the now of silence, the now of the not yet of his son being born. He had to grapple with these realities of the now and the knowledge that the not yet was still to come. You know, the circumstance that Zechariah found himself in changed in an instant of the visit from the angel. His reality changed from having a prominent vocal role as a priest in the community to one of silence. The voice in his marriage was silenced. So what did he do? The Bible tells us that he went home. The angel had told him he wouldn't be able to speak until his son John was born. John wasn't yet conceived because he wasn't with Elizabeth, so he had at least 9 months to wait. The routine of his life had completely changed. So what could he do? He had to wait it out. He must have felt isolated. He must have felt frustrated. He must have been confused. He must have been restless as he waited. And what about us? We too live in the tension of the now and the not yet. What about our now? What does it look like for us? Perhaps your now is one that you don't really want to be in. It's a struggle. And you're tired, like Zechariah, of waiting. You're tired, you're frustrated, you're isolated, there's confusion, and there's restlessness. And what about the not yet? Do you have a longing for something, but the distance between your now and this not yet just seems so far from one another? It's like small children, isn't it, who get in the car, or not so small children, perhaps in our kids' cases, and they've only been in the car for 5 minutes, and then they're, are we nearly there? And you know you've got another 5 hours to go. On a long flight, when I travel, I try to resist the temptation to look at the aeroplane. They have a little screen. On your screen, they have an aeroplane that moves across to show you how long of the journey you've got left. And I try with all my might not to look at that aeroplane because it's going to tell me, yeah, you still have 7.5 hours to go. And you're like, really? You just want to be there. Perhaps for you, your not yet is longing for a change in a job, or to have a job, a change in your home, a change in a part of your character that you would love just to be gone, the healing of an illness, or a diagnosis for pain or suffering that doesn't come, the healing of a broken relationship, an opportunity for reconciliation, a longing for war to be over, a longing for the persecution of our brothers and sisters in Christ around the world to be over. And then there's this strange space, isn't there, between the now and the not yet. The tension of some things are resolved and some things aren't. Some things we can see the answers to as we look back, and we can see how God brought it together and it led to something good. And then there's times where there's no answer, where there's silence, or where the path doesn't seem to have an end. It can be on a personal level, but it can also be in our families. It can be in our churches. It can be in our communities and our nation. And God's word talks of that too, this creation longing and groaning for the return of Christ, because it's not how it's meant to be. In these situations, we continue to live in the now, even though we long for the not yet. And living in the now can be hard when we want the not yet and it's not coming any closer. Or we have to deal with the likelihood that the not yet might never come. I thought I'd share a little bit of my testimony over this last year. Over this last year, I've had a new experience to deal with in my life, and that is a struggle with anxiety and low resilience. I've always been someone who analyzes. Graham will vouch for that, and my family. And I guess I could be described as an overthinker. But in overthinking and working things out, I could often sort things out in my mind. I could get to grips with things. I could get a perspective, and I could kind of figure things out. But this was a different experience. It was totally overwhelming me, physically and emotionally. It stopped me from doing things. It stopped me from going out. It stopped me from mixing with people. It stopped me making choices that I would normally make. I struggled in my church life. I had panic attacks in that hallway. I remember Yvonne praying for me out in the hallway one Sunday because just walking in gave me a panic attack with the amount of people. It affected my home life, it affected my relationships, and it affected me in my workplace. It overtook me, and I was thinking, who is this person? Who is this Ruth? I don't know her. What's happening to me? I have a wonderful husband. My kids and their spouses are great helpers to me and a support and listeners. I have lovely friends who were supporting me. I got work colleagues who cared about me and listened, but I just couldn't see beyond this anxiety that overwhelmed me. I couldn't move away from worst case scenario in all the situations I was going through. It was often illogical, it was often irrational, but I couldn't step out of it. It followed me, it stole my joy. It was frustrating, it was frightening. I longed for it to be gone and to get away from the now and to move into the not yet of healing and being able to manage and cope. Earlier I mentioned the book that I've read by Ruth Chu Simons. It's not a deep theological book. It's more of a guide and encouragement based on biblical themes with an underlying theological framework. And she writes this, I've got the quote on the screen. Yesterday might be revealing. Someday may be promising. But right now can seem so far from where we really long to be. How do we live in a painful now and longing for the not yet? What can we learn and be taught in the spaces between the now and the not yet? Ruth has a couple of suggestions, and I'd like to just share those. Firstly, hidden doesn't mean forgotten. There are times when we might feel like we're forgotten by God, but that is not the case. Zechariah was hidden in his silence for a time, from this prominent community role to his home with no voice. Ruth makes this statement: you don't have to be blooming to be growing. In the winter, many of our trees look dead. There's no leaves, there's no flowers, there's no greenery, but they're not dead. That's far from the truth. They're being protected from the winter months. They're taking time to rest, and they're taking time to be prepared for the spring and summer when the leaves and the flowers return. And so it is with us. Excuse me. There may be times of hiding, but it doesn't mean that God isn't working or walking alongside us. We might not see the progress in the timeline we would like, but it doesn't mean that God isn't working. Pressing into the now. Sometimes we're waiting to do things until we're a better person, until we've got X, Y, and Z sorted. But pressing into the now, facing it, accepting it, and having a learning spirit ready to learn from the Lord and change if needed is so important. Like the kids who just want to get there on the long journey, I just wanted to get there with getting rid of anxiety in my life. But just as Zechariah had to press into the now that God gave him, so I needed to press into the now that God gave me. I had to accept it. I had to face it. I had to live through it. And I had to work on how to manage and how to deal with it. It was okay not to like the now I was in, but it didn't mean I couldn't press into it. Our nows are important. My family, my friends, and my colleagues know that I am an impatient person. If there's a problem, I want to fix it. I want to get to the end goal. But often, I'm actually not ready. And sometimes others alongside me aren't ready yet either. My boss, Paul, often reminds me when I'm impatient, Ruth, we are not in a hurry. We're ready, but we need to wait for others to be ready too. In the waiting and the hidden places of our lives, the soil of our hearts can be prepared to be ready to receive a promise. Zechariah, was that why he needed to be silenced? So his heart could be prepared to receive this amazing promise that God had given? So can we use these times too to press in, to prepare our hearts? I'm not saying it's easy. It takes perseverance. It takes patience. It takes humility to learn in the difficult nows of our lives. How do we cope, though, with not knowing the answers of the not yets? What if the not yet we so badly want never comes? What if the illness stays? What if we can't be reconciled in that relationship? There are so many what ifs, which is a part of anxiety, that it can become exhausting with the spinning of our minds. The ladies in our Thrive group are doing a devotional, an Advent devotional, and it's been beautiful. The lady writes the most amazing blessings and poems, but this was a quote from it of this last couple of weeks. It takes courage to wrap our minds around the inconvenient truths, the difficult truths, the complicated and seemingly contradictory truths. Courage. Don't talk about courage often, do we? You and I can't see the future of our lives, and that can be hard when the now is difficult and the not yets aren't answered. Here's another quote, a bit longer. Thanks, Hannah, so much. We want his provision and the relief his blessings will bring. But we don't want the wilderness that teaches us about our great need for him. We want trust, but we don't want the doubt that leads us there. We want to see God provide, but we don't want the insufficiencies that reveal his faithfulness. We want greater faith, but we don't want the unknowns that pave the way. We want deliverance without the desert. You know, I can really identify with this because for me, in my walk with God, trusting God is the hardest aspect of being a Christian. It's a wrestle, it's a challenge for me. Can I trust God in the now and the not yets? Trust that he knows best in both. Madeleine L'Engle said this: I have a point of view, you have a point of view, God has a view. Do we trust that God has a view? Trusting that the times of hiding, the times of pressing into the now, and using those as times of learning and preparation are so important to be a part of God's view. Are our eyes so fixed on what's here yet, that we're on the, not what isn't here yet, sorry, that we're missing all that's to be gained in the now? This year I've had to learn to accept and manage anxiety in my life. I've had to hide at times to process. I've had to press in to learn. And I've had to make changes and also accept that it might never go away. The desire and the dream for my anxiety not to be a part of my life might never come. Am I leaning on God in those times or relying on my own ideas and my own comforts? I can't fix everything. I can't work everything out. My timing isn't God's. But are my priorities in those times the same as his? I can look back at other times in my life, at difficult times where God has been faithful. Will he do it again? Will I trust again in those difficult times? Will I remember the faithfulness of God in the past to bring perseverance for the present and hope for the future? You know, Zechariah, part of his role was to be a model. He was a model, an example to the people as a priest. But then he had to model something completely different. He had to model months of silence, a silence that was totally unexpected and, I'm sure, uncomfortable. I mean, priests use their voice a lot, hey? He was a model as he silently and patiently waited. He accepted his situation, he was obedient, and he learned to trust. And he was a model to us in his response as he sang a song of faith and hope. Last Tuesday, we had our team Christmas Day. So kind of a highlight of the, well, it's for me anyway, highlight of the year where we get together. And part of the day, we had a game of crazy golf. I don't know if anyone's been to Game On. Yeah, I'd never been before. And so we were split into teams and we played crazy golf. And I was in a team with the lovely Phil Halliwell. And after a while, we began to realize that Mr. Halliwell was doing very well in crazy golf. And we were like, Phil, you know, this is, we didn't realize you had this skill. And he admitted that what he'd been doing was taking his turn last because he could watch us all get it wrong. And then he knew what not to do and what to do to get the golf ball in the hole with the fewest shots. We were like, smart move. Without realizing it, we were modeling to Phil how to get the best score in crazy golf. And he'll remember because at that time I said, I've just had an illustration for my sermon, and I went and wrote it down in my phone. And he was chuckling. I don't think he realized it was him. But you know, can we be a model to others in the difficult times of now? Perhaps someone is being that model to you now. In their times of difficulty, they're modeling something that you're going through or you can identify with. Why not thank them today? Why not encourage them by saying, wow, your example and how you're going through this is just such an encouragement to me as I walk through something similar, or I may face something similar. Can we respond as Zechariah did? In times of darkness, can we respond with a song and the light of praise? This song links the now and the not yet. It's a beautiful reflection of the gospel, of fear and doubt giving way to trust, of anticipation seeing fulfillment. Zechariah sings with thanks for the past, a commitment to the present, and a hope for the future. Is that something we can do too? Perhaps the challenge for us is to remember to look back at God's faithfulness in other times, at what God has done, so that we can commit and press into the now and look forward with trust and hope to the future. Zechariah had a song for the now and the not yet. And I mentioned earlier a song called Now and Not Yet, which has meant a lot to me in my walk with God this year as I've walked this journey of now and not yet. So I thought we could listen to it. It's a song that calls us to trust God, who is over all the now and the not yets. It talks of trusting God in the past, the God of our past, our future and our now. It talks of trusting God in our pain and our joy. It talks of trusting God, the God of our victories and our defeats. It's a call to trust God in the conundrums of our life, not just the things we can understand or explain. To continue living for God in the now we are living in and trusting him for the not yets. You know, songs are powerful things. Think of how many songs are included in the Bible. It's tremendous. That's why, one of the reasons why I love worship so much. It's very hard this morning because I was protecting my voice just to stand silent. Maybe that was an identification with Zechariah. This year I had a very powerful experience of a song. I was away with work and our Asian preaching movement coordinators from all across Asia gathered for training. And we had two brothers and a sister from China that were there. And obviously that was, they come from a very different experience of Christianity. And actually, one of the guys there, his pastor, had just been arrested literally 2 days before they came. And there's a nice song there. And we were having worship times, and we were doing different languages. So we sang a Chris Tomlin song, a City of Light song. And they put the Chinese up in phonetics, because obviously I can't read Chinese symbols. Or none of us. I mean, I think there's about 3 people that could speak Mandarin. But of course, there's loads of other dialects as well, and languages. And so we sang together in Chinese this song. I mean, goodness knows, it probably didn't sound anything like what it's meant to sound, but we tried with the phonetics. And we sang. And it was so powerful. And you know what they said? We've never heard that song sung by so many people at one time. Because they have to just meet in 8 people, 9 people in a home. And there we were, 80 of us. From all around the world. Well, all around Asia, and then me stuck on the side. Singing together. The power of a song. And I have it in my Spotify playlist now. And every time it comes up, I have a tear in my eye of that memory. The power of singing God's praise together. People that live in a difficult now, who long for the not yet. It would be a dream for them to be here like this morning. So I'd like us to listen to the song together. And then I have a prayer which was written by Ruth Chew Simons. And Claire has very kindly spent time. So I think there's about 70 copies here, and they've been laminated. So hopefully we'll have enough. If not, we can print some more after, or maybe married couples or families maybe just share one. So I'd like us to listen to the song. The words will come up. They're very powerful, I think, as we look through this now and not yet. And then I was wondering if we could just go into pairs or threes or whatever and just pray this over one another. It's a prayer for the now and the not yet. And then I'll close in prayer after that. But let's just pray before we listen to the song.